you can check out the
Yeah, because I called Maria about it. She told me it was
right.
so that's
Exactly.
Good. Yeah.
Yep. So welcome out there to all our faithful viewers. Tonight is the last night of our Bible study, but be watching our YouTube channel over the summer as we expect more videos to come out. So just kind of keep an eye on us, but we'll be taking a break until the fall. So tonight we are talking about the future of the Episcopal Church, and we're going to start with Matthew 28. Bible. Yeah. Oh, here, I'll give you this so we have the same translation. Okay. Matthew 28, verse 16. So that's just the New Testament. So Matthew should be the first book in there.
Okay.
Yeah, I know. Huh? For all you church nerds out there, I have my curate with me tonight. Yep. Curate. Okay. 28:16. I'll read it. This is after Easter. Now the 11 disciples went to Galilee to the mountain to which Jesus had directed them. When they saw him, they worshipped him, but some doubted. And Jesus came and said to them, "All authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Go therefore and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything that I have commanded you. And remember, I am with you always until the end of the age." My initial comments are, it's pretty amazing that here they are, it's after Easter, there's the risen Lord, and they worship him, but some doubted. That's always amazing to me that there's that doubt and that faith mixed together. And the way I read it is that doubt and faith are not mutually exclusive. We oftentimes think they are, but I think sort of faith. Doubt and faith we actually sort of commingled. It's fear and faith that are opposites. A wise priest once told me that.
Seems reasonable.
Yeah. I mean, because we know this from our own lives, right? Like, doubt, even though we believe, we doubt. Even if we don't always admit it, I think the two sort of are mingled up together. Yeah. And doubting yourself, doubting others, there's all sorts of.
Well, you doubt what you've seen. I can that.
Yeah.
Like, how can this be?
Right. This is crazy. Yeah.
Yeah, it's parts of your wonderment.
Right.
Of how things.
Right.
Perceived, how it happens.
Totally. And then you have what I see in my question there is there is both challenge. What strikes you as the most important part? The challenge is go therefore and make disciples of all nations, and the comfort is I'm with you always to the end of the age, which is actually my favorite line in the entire New Testament. I am with you always to the end of the age.
It's amazing to me how often that part is just cut out when someone's talking about this passage. They stop right there.
Right. Yeah, because it's make disciples, baptize, teach,
exactly. Go.
Obey.
Exactly.
And it's like, but I'm with you. And to me, that's like the sort of great lesson I think the Episcopal Church needs right now is no matter what happens, Jesus is with us to the end of the age. And I think we always hear this sort of like, well, first of all, don't worry about that. Like, that I think that's the fear. That's, and also Jesus is still going to be Lord, whether there's a church or not. Like God's sort of being God is not upon us showing up to church or not. So I think, that takes that sort of the monkey off our back to say, look, God is God. Jesus is with us to the end of the age. I think there can be a little bit of relief there.
I think there's a lot of relief there too, just in general about when you get to be so depressed or fearful about what's going on in the world.
Yeah.
You're not having to do it by yourself.
Right.
You're not the only. You're not out here by yourself. You have Jesus is with you. So I think that is a tremendous comfort, not just for the church, but
Yeah,
for people in general.
totally. Yeah, like you said, the refugees in Myanmar. I mean, in a sense, I mean, even though it's so hard, we
Absolutely.
okay, now go to 21. And I think a lot of times we think Revelation is about the end of the world. I think Revelation is the word Revelation comes from the same word as reveal. And so it's the Greek word is the word they would use. Apocalypse is the word to pull back a curtain and see what's beyond the window. And so I think what John is seeing, his name is John, is the pulling back, and he sees the heavenly throne room. And so the sort of real, I think, message of Revelation is that the Christians are at a time where they're being tempted by the emperor, the Roman emperor. And so John is saying, but look at the true worship of the true throne of heaven. And there's this sort of dichotomy there. So he's calling us to always remember where our true worship is. And so we're going to start with chapter 21, verse 22. And this is what he sees. I saw no temple in the city, for it's God the Almighty and the Lamb, and the city has no need of sun or moon to shine on it, for the glory of God is its light, and its lamp is the Lamb. The nations will walk by its light, and the kings of the earth will bring their glory into it. Its gates will be by day, and there will be no night there. People will bring into it the glory and the honor of the nations, but nothing unclean will enter it, nor anyone who practices abomination or falsehood, but only those who are written in the Lamb's book. Then the angel showed me the river of the water of life, bright as crystal, flowing from the throne of God and of the Lamb through the middle of the street of the city. On either side of the river is the tree of life with its 12 kinds of fruit, producing its fruit each month. The tree are for the healing of the nations. Nothing accursed will be found there anymore, but the throne of God and of the Lamb will be in it, and his servants will worship him. They will see his face, and his name will be on their foreheads, and there will be no more night. They need no light of lamp or sun, for the Lord God will be their light, and they will reign forever and ever. And he said to me, these words are trustworthy and true, for the Lord, the God of the spirits of the prophets, has sent his angel to show his servants what must soon take place. Soon, blessed is the one. Okay, so I know it's a very odd image. So one of the things in it that's amazing to me is the whole sort of scriptures that are cyclical. Here we are at the end of Revelation, and what do we find but a river and tree producing fruit, which is exactly where we are in Genesis at the beginning of Genesis. And so this is almost a reworking of the Genesis story to say, you know how we were kicked out, we are now back home, and that there's healing there. As before there was cursing, now there's healing. And I think the other thing that we need to pull from this is the worship. That at the end of the day, what the people do around God's throne is worship. I think a lot of times in the church, worship comes second or third. We think about all the other stuff to do church, like the churchy stuff we do, when really at the end of the day, this is the most important thing, is the worship of God. And I think that always has to remain a priority, especially for the future church. We're going to be out entertained by the NFL. Like Hollywood will always come up with a better sort of show than we can. People will find fellowship in other ways, but what we have to offer is the true worship of the Lamb of God. And I think that's where the church has to focus, is worship. And of course, what does worship look like? Well, I mean, that's a whole nother question. Worship does not necessarily have to be, us sitting in pews, facing an altar. It can look like many different things, but I think that's really where the heart of the church needs to be in the future.
And I think that's why some mega churches and some other churches are having problems because I think they've left that behind.
Mm-hmm.
I think, and I think people go, and after a while, they become really dissatisfied
Right.
with that because
Right.
if what you're interested in is worship, and as you say, it can look different,
Right.
but if what you're interested in is worship and what you're getting is drama,
Yeah.
that's maybe not what you were there for.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
The worship now, those big mega churches you're talking about, it doesn't allow for the reflection, of oneself anymore. That's the thing. What you get fed in church through the worship, you should be able to take and reflect on it. Apply, and that's not happening. It's all like commercialized.
Yeah. Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and I mean, like I said, we're in the day and age where the church simply doesn't have the resources to compete with that. So what I say is like, just don't compete with it.
If I want to watch the NFL, I'll watch the NFL.
Right, exactly. If I want to go see a movie, yeah, exactly. I'm gonna go see a movie.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, and then my question is about this: what thing or idea in the church needs the most healing? If we're all sort of gathered around there and we're being healed, what is the thing that the church needs healing of? And one of the things I think is just anxiety. Yeah, and that gets back into that whole sort of, well, we just need to perpetuate ourselves into the future and sort of make sure that the church for the next generation. To me, that's a healthy anxiety because that's about us. That's not about God. And I think that's one of the things that we need to be healed of, that we quit worrying about ourselves and truly focus here on God. And I think then everything flows downhill from that.
I think so too. I also think, and I don't know exactly how to put it in words, but I think when we start to focus on, I have the one true right answer here, and if you are not on the same page with me, then I that's deadly. I think that's just deadly.
Oh yeah, big time. And it's funny because Episcopalians, we can almost go full circle on this because then we can say there are many truths and many ways of doing that. And if you don't believe that, then it's like, well, then you're just saying that there's only, it's like, so exactly. We have to find that sort of middle ground right down here to where we're uncomfortable in the areas of gray. But no, I think it's a really good point. The point's well taken that the church needs to be healed of its sort of presumption.
Yeah, I don't know I don't know the word for that,
right.
But there is I surely have been involved in it.
Right.
And there's no doubt that when you're in the midst of all of that, even if you're trying not to be into it, it's very disturbing. And it's very, and it destroys.
It exists.
Oh yeah, big time. Yeah, big time. And I think that's also, that's a sickness that we also see in our political culture.
Yeah.
I have the right answer, and it's like, well, can't we all sort of acknowledge that we might be wrong?
And couldn't there be several right answers?
Right, exactly. Yeah. So you see my little bit there about tomorrow's world. These are the sort of phrases we now kick around. We call tomorrow's world VUCA, volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. And I think the ambiguity, right, is that tomorrow's world is going to be more ambiguous. And by us just sort of hammering or trying to hammer down and saying we have the absolute single truth, the rest of the world's going to just not acknowledge that because they're going to understand that there's a lot more ambiguity out there. This world is volatile. This is ISIS, and the fact that tomorrow's world will be increasing in volatility in the sense that 75 years ago, if there was a group like ISIS, it wouldn't really have the impact that it has now because there was no modern media for them to get their message out there. So it's not that there have always been bad dudes and there will always be bad dudes. It's just the way that bad dudes have been able to connect around the world with other bad dudes. And same thing with good. But
I also think that it's not only that they can instantly know it.
Yeah.
I mean, just that, you know, the change, to me, one of the biggest changes in this country happened in the 1960s when we could see the war in Vietnam on the evening television set.
Yeah.
Whether you were in favor of it or not in favor of it, it put it in your in front of you.
Yeah.
And I think that that becomes
same thing with the like the segregation, right?
Yeah.
And the
Absolutely.
right, exactly.
Absolutely.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, and now the wild thing is we're even beyond that, where you would still have to turn on your TV to sort of, now our media is in a sense pushing things onto us. So that is even that sort of ramped up level. Uncertainty, I think this is financial uncertainty as well. We're all about the future. I think about the people like my classmates from college, the clergy person who wanted to be a clergy person at college, and my friends who wanted to be teachers. We were really the few people who actually knew what we wanted to do and went to college for that thing. Same with Maggie. She knew she wanted to be a physical therapist. But a lot of people, they just went to college and didn't. And this has caused, and you all know this, like more people my age having more part-time jobs, more temporary jobs, sort of working with one company then another. I realize all this, that I know I'll be working for one company like until I die, right? That for
sign that contract.
Right, exactly. Yeah, exactly. So you know, whereas before, like my father's generation, he worked for the same corporation his entire life, you know, and there was a pension and all that sort of stuff, and those things just don't exist anymore. It's much more uncertain.
I also think that I have a young friend who I spent some time talking to this last week, and she's just graduated from U of H last week, and really bright, top, you know, all those kind of things. Has a degree in finance, and a degree in economics, and a degree in gosh knows what you can imagine. There's a ton of them, and she made straight A's, so she's brilliant. But the stress in her life is eating her lunch. And I can remember feeling exactly the same way she does, although I knew it was like you. I knew what I wanted to do and had trained to do and like that. But I didn't have a job. I didn't know how to get a job. Didn't know how to find a job. And everywhere I went, people said, well, I need someone with at least 5 years experience. So how do I get that 5 years experience?
If you don't hire me. Yeah.
And you know, I've got $1 billion worth of debt, and I've, you know, got all these things looking at me, and it is an incredible amount of stress on her right this minute. And then that makes it worse, because when she comes to interview with you, that's what you get, is a ball of stress, because that's where she is. That's where she really is. So we're
and you know, and then you're trying to say like, just chill out, but
you can't. She can't. She is. She seems like her shoulders are up near her ears. I mean, she's just wound up.
Yeah, I mean, and I think, you know, even now being 30, I think, the people 10 years younger than I am, 8 years younger than I am, I graduated in 2006, which at least was before the Great Recession. Like when we all thought, we all knew we could still get jobs, right? This is Ebola, that a seemingly contained virus in West Africa can make its way around the world. And again, not to be scary, right? I mean, you know, like like Ebola's coming for you. But we just now know that our world is increasingly complex, and that things that used to be able to sort of be confined are now all isolated, complex and integrated. So that's tomorrow's world, a VUCA world. The thing is, we can talk about how terrible this is, but the collect for today, for Alcuin, Dean, and Abbott starts off.
I've read it now twice, so I've got it.
Like, oh Almighty God, in a rude and barbarous age you raised up Alcuin. And the thing is, he died in 804, and so, you know, I kind of think, okay. So he also lived in a VUCA world, like in rude and barbarous, whatever. Things have changed, but they have not changed. And I think that is the other thing that we need to remember for the future of the church. Jesus will still be with us. It's still a crazy world. Just, you know, we need to remember where we come from. Alcuin didn't sort of like throw up his hands and, you know, like Well, it's a root of barbarous age, so I'm done with it. We said we're not going to say it's a VUCA world, so we're done with it. You know, you just sort of take your mission field or whatever it is and go for it. So I want to talk a little bit about the future of parishes. Flip it, because this sort of I realized it was a little herky-jerky this morning. I flip to the back page and go to the future of the Episcopal Church. Let's talk about the big picture. Kind of like my sermon, I think every crisis leads to an opportunity. The Episcopal Church, you know, I talked about last week about all those top-down things. We'll either do that intentionally, or like I said last week, there will be a financial crisis that will kill them off. So I think either way, we're realizing that we're going to have to restructure for mission, make disciples of all nations. Jesus didn't say, go therefore and make more committees for you to sit on, right? You know, this is, so I think the church is going to be going back to its sort of its first century understanding. This is a VUCA world, and that we're going to have to go engage the world. We can no longer expect the world just to show up at our church doors. Financial constraints, like I said, you know, it's just the writing's on the wall. There's been an interesting movement, you can check it out. It's called A Memorial to the Episcopal Church. I just endorsed it, so you should see my name on the website. And it's really calling for the same things. And a sort of refocusing on prayer and worship. And they have cool ideas that are in similar stages throughout the country. So say like a rector in a suburban area like me, maybe in a different part of the country, could connect easier. You know, right, exactly. That though, you know, I'm most like the other sort of grassroots network across the country would be a much more healthier model than the sort of top-down structure we have. Same thing with helping church planters and people starting new churches. Because, you know, people are doing this all around the country, and they need to be able to share resources better. So Memorial to the Episcopal Church is saying one thing, that we really do think that parts of the church are going to have to die in order for other parts to be raised up. And the good thing is, that's the Christian story. Things die so they can be made again. So in a sense, we're hoping the Episcopal Church dies so that it can be reborn. So that's what I see happening. How all that shakes out, I have no earthly idea, but I'm pretty sure it will. Now, the future of dioceses, examples of the Diocese of Fort Worth. If you remember, that's that, you know, it's a tiny little diocese. So what they have just done is very interesting. Did as their provisional bishop, not as because they're not even big enough to have their own bishop. They have elected as provisional bishop the Bishop of Northwest Texas. So that's the first step to them merging together, which I think is going to happen with a lot of dioceses, is that you will have a lot of these very small dioceses come down and merge so that they have greater pool of resources to share. And I mean, that just makes a lot of sense, right? I mean, you know, why have all these sort of independent little cells? Like, if we're going to be if we're going to live in a complex world, part of VUCA world, then we have to sort of mirror that in our complexity. And, you know, it's interesting. There are a couple dioceses every year that have fewer confirmations than Holy Comforter does. You know, these are very small, like we're talking about like 6 parishes, like in northern Michigan or something, that you think, okay, that's not really viable. Long-term, that's not viable to have a bishop and that sort of thing for that few people. So I think there are already some dioceses that have part-time bishops, and you're like, okay, that seems sort of odd, right? So I think what will be happening is that smaller places will merge.
Sort of forming like a hub, maybe.
Yeah, exactly.
And then, you know, them going
exactly. And, you know, there's nothing wrong with that, but I think that's what is going to be happening at the diocesan level. We're going to also be sharing resources more, and we already do this for the Diocese of Fort Worth. All our clergy conferences and all that clergy stuff that we go to, or supposed to go to, they invite clergy from the Diocese of Fort Worth, which is a good thing. You know, it's like, you know, we can share. Yeah, exactly.
And I think that's exactly it, is the resource idea more than almost anything else. You know, if you're an isolated, small Upper Peninsula, Michigan priest, you know, and you never get to exchange ideas
Right.
with anybody but the guy that's
And how's your
100
Right.
miles away.
Exactly.
In the same exact situation you're in.
Exactly.
How are you going to possibly adapt?
Exactly.
You can't.
Right.
And it's bound to be frustrating. You have no vision, no.
Yeah.
there's no growth.
Yeah. There's
Yeah,
no growth.
exactly.
There's nothing.
Yeah. And so, yeah, and I think that's part of that grassroots network is that he could talk to somebody in the backwoods of Georgia, and they probably have a lot more in common than, you know, that guy with the people in Detroit, which are much closer.
Right.
So, you know, it's just a different, you know,
Yeah, absolutely.
which I think is a really cool idea.
Yeah. I mean, that
Yeah.
really
Oh, yeah. I
is-
want to say that.
really
Totally.
is it.
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
you know, it's way cool because there are people who are really seeing things from a really different point of view than I see them,
Right.
because they're in an entirely different.
Yep.
I can promise you, the people in Indiana see things differently than I do,
Totally.
and
yeah.
you know, it's worth me hearing that.
Yeah.
And sometimes
absolutely.
it's actually worth them hearing my opinion. So it works out.
And totally. And so that's the reverse. We talk about how bad it is that ISIS can use sort of digital. Well, but it's a good thing that we can,
We
you
can
know,
use it.
right, we can use it
Yeah.
too. So, I mean, in the same way, you wouldn't say, well, we should stop printing books because lies have been printed in books. Like, you're just not going to do that. You know, so. Okay, the future of parishes. And then the future of Holy Comforter, the way I see it. Okay, so I want to talk, first of all, about, these are really the sort of five, there's a sixth that we'll touch on briefly. Size parishes. So you can see here in our little thing, I'll just save our watchers at home. These are congregations with ASA, that's average Sunday attendance, and these are all rough, you know, sort of guides of 1 to 75. So you can see this is 47% of Episcopal congregations have less than 75 people on a Sunday. Like, that's wild. Because and we have a ton of these. I think they're
Are these parishes? Are they like meeting in people's homes?
some or where it's like the church like
I
Jefferson.
mean, how do you pay the
County.
electricity with 25 people?
Well, so the interesting thing, you've seen Jeff Fisher. Are you friends with him on Facebook? You should
No, I know
friend.
he is.
Yeah, a friend Bishop Fisher. He'll friend you back. And he
Yeah.
always takes a picture of where he is every Sunday. Some of these churches are tiny. They're like this size, you know, and it's got like 4 pews. And the interesting thing is they're used to really not having a priest.
Yeah.
So there's actually incredible stability in these places. And also, you know, it's like 1 or 2 families. A very classic example I know of is St. John's in Sealy. That's like 1 family that really is sort of there all the time. And they're incredibly resilient. Bishop Fisher's got a great story where he comes to these suburban congregations, and our anxiety about money and growth and whatever is like through the roof, right? He goes to like the tiny church in, you know, Jefferson County or whatever, and they're like, well, we made it through the Civil War, so, you know, and you're just like, okay, you know, and they're like, yeah, we'll be fine. We made it through the Civil War. Well, that's so true.
My first year out of college, I lived in a little town called Marksville in South Louisiana, where I taught school. And there were 12 Episcopalians.
Mm-hmm.
And they had this little tiny, it was not as big as it was not as big as this room, I don't think. A little tiny place that they met. And I'll never forget, the priest came on Wednesdays. It's the day that we had Wednesday. Wednesday was the day he came to Marksville. And so I'll never forget his first visit, and he said to me, okay, here's the deal. And I was a brand new Episcopalian. I had been confirmed less than a year. And he says, here's the deal. Here much. So we marched right across the street to the Roman Catholic Church. He said, let me introduce you to the priest over here. And when I am not here, this is who's going to take care of you. And the 12 Episcopalians went to the Roman Church on Sunday and on Wednesday had service.
That is so funny.
Yeah,
Exactly. Yeah.
It just seemed a little strange to me.
Yeah, a little strange. But yeah, and you think about like financially too. Like if you're not paying a full-time priest, then you know your mortgage has been paid off for the last 150 years.
Not much.
There's really not much. So there's actually a lot of stability there.
We took turns doing the linens.
Yeah. And these churches are run by a matriarch or patriarch or a single family. And if a priest does show up here, every decision has to be run through that person. And that's just the sort of way it is. Okay, so pastoral size congregation. Oh yeah, this is interesting. Pastor as chaplain of family feuds, which you can see, you know.
Oh, yes.
Okay, so that's family size. Pastoral size is 76-40. 1/4 of Episcopal congregations. This is pastor centered, and you've heard me talk about this. This is where we were when I showed up, and for good or for ill, everything came through me, through the pastor. What colored flowers do you want? How do you want the chairs arranged? Like all that sort of stuff, which I wasn't anxious about because I knew that's who we were. You can see governance, key families are still in the vestry, but new groups are, and that sort of makes it a little bit awkward. But I'm really at the center, and you see fights are over the pastor and the pastor's attention. Which is so true about sort of like, well, like which Bible study am I going to? Whose home have I been to recently? Things like that.
Wow.
See, so it's just,
I've been missing out on something here.
Yeah.
and not fights, but sort of squabbling.
Friction.
Friction's a good word. Yeah, friction's. Okay, this is where we are now. Transitional size. 15% of Episcopal congregations stretch cell. You've heard me talk about this. How we are stretched right now. Families still may be on the vestry. That's sort of true, not always true. Many new groups are forming, and there's some outside influence, and then subgroups are forming. So a perfect example is probably very few people know right now that Juanita and Maria are working on the library. That's a subgroup that will be held up, but right now, right, exactly. So there are all these sorts of, and then you think about the folks who do the gardening.
Well, and then you have the book club that keeps morphing into other things.
Right, exactly. Just last night there was a mom's night out. And so we are clearly transitional, or we have groups and subgroups, and things are really sort of stretched out. We all see the needs we have, but we don't quite have the mass or the resources to get there.
It's like the furniture is being moved around.
Exactly. Yeah.
Until it sits.
That book who moved my cheese.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly.
I have that.
This size is still pastor is stretched. Exactly what I feel. We're at the cusp of needing additional staff, but we're not, we don't quite know how to do that yet or what that staff needs to be, which is true. I mean, that's just kind of where we are. Deacon Bob is in a sense that it's nice having another clergy person, even if it's, they're not having to preach every Sunday,
Like every other.
Right, exactly. Or, even I think he preaches once every 5 to 6 weeks, even having that one break, it just, yeah. And then fights are over inclusion, about who is on what, all that. Information and communication is a huge issue, because in a pastoral size and a family size congregation, the word of mouth works really well. Something needs to happen or whatever, word of mouth works well. At this size, not knows everybody else, so word of mouth, it doesn't work well. And so then our communication has to grow both ways, and that the church and staff have to do a better job of communicating outward, and then parishioners have to do a better job of communicating their needs inward. And that's just sort of where we are. And so, this is a size where if somebody says, well, I don't know what's going on here, I say, well, have you checked your email or read your worship bulletin? They say no. I say, oh, that's because we're here and they're used to being here. So,
Yeah, I hear a whole lot of that. That is the thing that I hear a whole lot of.
Isn't that interesting?
Well, I didn't know that. Well, why didn't you know that?
Yeah.
Well, nobody told me. Well, that's probably true. Nobody did tell you, but it was in this, and it was on that, and that.
Right, exactly.
But nobody came up to you and said, by the way, we're going to be doing whatever there is on Friday night.
Yeah. Nobody told me. Well, somebody told you.
But just not the way you're accustomed to. Yeah.
It's like pastoral, they're used to being held by the hand.
Mm-hmm.
And now they get their apron strings cut off.
Right, exactly.
So,
right.
And they're feeling it.
Yeah.
And that's all it is.
Yeah. It's changed.
So it's just stretching. And yeah, no, it's funny because nobody told me.
Yeah.
Well, probably nobody told you. You had, Program size congregation, 225 to 800. Multi-cell, clearly. There's just a lot of things going on. It's group-centered. Committees have power. Vestry moves to an oversight board. They're giving more of the policies and procedures because, like we're saying, in this size church, they're the ones telling you, well, that doesn't work because with 225 people, this doesn't work that way. And so the vestry becomes the sort of policy makers, all that sort of stuff. Administrator and delegator. And this is the thing that gives everybody here anxiety is, will I know the rector anymore? That's part of the anxiety. Will I know the priest anymore? The answer is yes. I'm not going to know everybody as well as I know you. The other thing about this is that people in sort of in this segment here really want to maintain intimacy. They want to sort of keep knowing everybody. At this level, there are going to be so many people that they won't know everybody. The trick is actually once you break this hump, you actually gain intimacy because there are more groups and programs and ministries to where that is actually where you're plugged in, and it's just not through me, which I think is a healthier model because then the rector can come and go for the congregation. If everything is going through the pastor, when the pastor comes and goes, it can be really bad.
The other thing is just as you say, if you have more leadership, then you're going to have more points of view. Yeah. Therefore, it's going to appeal. I may agree with you, and Susie may agree with Bob, or whatever it might be, and that's okay because there's more points of view, and I'll find the group that fit in.
Exactly.
And so if you move to point B, that's still okay because we still have other folks. At the same time, probably someone with a similar point of view will show up, and that group of people will be just as happy as they were.
Exactly. Yep. You have critical mass here. Now, the sort of concern also here is when you talk about like, there are groups with different points of view. Is like, well, so is everybody just in their own clique? So that can happen, and so that's why it's about maintaining health. And I think also in part of this, it's maintaining a vision because I'm convinced that every church has a certain amount of energy in it, and that without a clear vision and things moving forward, all that energy that should be focused outward will come inward, and then that's where you have crises, is when all that energy becomes, and you can see this, fights are now over resources and priorities, and those are inward concerns. How come my ministry didn't get a budget increase this year, but theirs did? Or how come, whatever.
I think there's a lot more competition at that level.
Yeah. And that's why the sort of pastor has to be a really good delegator, and the pastor has to trust their staff, because that's that danger of micromanaging.
So, right.
Yeah.
Until we get to that point of program.
But and the good thing is, of course, at this point, like I said, there's sort of quality in your programs and ministries, and that's why maintaining a healthy staff and good quality programs are going to be are going to be so crucial. So then people don't start complaining about sort of what is. Yeah, exactly. And then resource size, 800 plus. This is like the cathedral downtown or something like that. I mean, whoa. Now, the interesting thing is this is also pastor-centered. And when you think about it, it makes a lot of sense. That let's see, this is pastor-centered, and this is really pastor-centered. And it kind of makes sense because when you're in a place that big, not a whole lot of people know each other. So the person here really takes on the sort of the like big vision casting, preaching, teaching. And then it says pastor is CEO of the operation. I mean, in a sense, because you're working in many of these cases then a multi-million-dollar budget, a huge staff. I mean, this type is, and you can see this is 0.5% of the number of Episcopal churches in the country. So, this is a very rare breed.
I would think each one of those requires a special kind of ministry.
Oh, yeah.
And I think there are people that do probably well in one, but my guess is if you were good at being down on the far end, the family or the pastoral group, and you were all of a sudden thrown into this kind of
it's a really
arena,
good point.
It would be very difficult because you may or may not have that.
Understand what it means to change. And this is also the problem in growing churches. And I always take this to heart. If I don't change and my leadership style doesn't change, then it doesn't matter.
I've seen that in businesses. I have seen people who could build a business, and when it got right there, they had no clue about what you do now. They spent all that energy getting to there, and then they had no plan for when they
It's that Peter principle, right? Yeah, exactly.
That's what it is.
So, and I think this is why you sort of checking in spiritually, being self-aware, like, when is it time for me to go? When is it time for me to pack my bags and say, I have accomplished my work here, and somebody else needs to come in, So, in all of this, in our VUCA world, in the future of the Episcopal Church, may be completely wrong, but I think these two types of congregations just aren't going to make it in the future. Without the excellence in programming, it being so driven by personality and just financial, these types of congregations just aren't going to cut it. And I think, because you think, if you're at this size and you're on the cusp, barely on the cusp, or a priest or not, and you can't, and so you start having supply clergy, priest, who maybe comes in every once in a while. I mean, you're going to be spinning downward. That's just the way I sort of.
Don't have constant leadership.
Yeah.
You're in trouble.
Yeah.
It's as simple as that.
Yeah. And so this is part of my vision for Holy Comforter, is not growth for growth's sake, but as I look at our community, I mean, this is really, I think, where we probably need to be. And I think that will provide us the stability in Spring to be here long term. I'd be very, I can be completely wrong. I mean, who knows? But as I look at sort of, as you look at giving and all this sort of stuff, you sort of realize, well, eventually the numbers just don't work at a church this size.
Well, and eventually people wear out. I mean, if you wear out, and the congregation wears out,
and then we start to go backwards.
Right, exactly. Yeah, and this is what everybody says. This is so stay here for very long. They either break that hump or they slide back down. Yeah, because it is just so incredible. And we know this. I mean, think about all of us. We are now very involved people, and we realize we can't do this for 5 or 7 years. We have to get to the point where we're the ones handing off and leading sort of things in 5 to 7 years, and that's okay.
It's better than okay. It's what
it's
goal. It's the plan.
Yep. And I think also these types of congregations are going to be better at doing house churches, things like that. I think this is going to be
I think there's more places for people's gifts. I think that you have somebody who really is a talented person with working with young people. So you got a whole crowd of college kids now, and you've got somebody who's really gifted at that, and they can focus on that one thing. They don't have to focus on 5 things.
Right.
And so as a result, I think you get, like you say, a better quality program because you can offer more. You have more resources to make that happen.
And I really do think there are actually some places, and this is an interesting thing about a transitional size church, there are some places where we still behave like this, where we are behaving like this. Because you think now, there are actually a number of programs and ministries that I have nothing to do with. And that's a good thing. I sort of, have some sort of oversight, but themselves. There's some places where we're still like this, but, that's okay. I was going to say something. I totally forgot.
I do think that in some cases we're like that. We're beginning
Yeah.
to move in that direction. We're beginning to see that happen. The other thing that I think is really neat that's happening here, and it doesn't always happen in a transition situation, at least in my experience, is that people are willing to okay, I'm going to let you have something that I have always had.
Right.
Yeah.
That is your gift, so you take it and go do it.
Yeah.
That is not something you always see people let go. You want to say, well, I've always done this.
Right. This is my
And
feet
if you're going to move from A
Yeah.
to B,
Yeah.
Oh, you are
You've
totally right. Yeah.
you've got to be able to.
Yeah.
People have to be
Right.
able to levels.
Just in case you're not around to do it.
Well, and
anymore.
just because I recognize that, yeah, I can do whatever there is, but wow, you can do it a lot better.
That's true.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, I think you're totally right.
It's like handing the baton down.
Yeah.
you
Yeah,
know?
it is.
Yep.
It
And
absolutely
it
is.
makes sense.
And this is why, and I've been sort of, I saw some sort of article on this, that we need to stop talking about growing churches, but rather talking about healthy churches. And I think that's one thing that a healthy church does is invite more leaders and allow people to back off from things when they're too tired or. So, and maybe you know, Karen is now our outreach coordinator. She's got some cool ideas, but I told her this is 2 years. You only get to do this for 2 years, and then like that's the deal, and then somebody else has to do it. And so it's sort of trying to inculcate that that sort of understanding that
Those kind of things. There's a certain, in my mind, a certain time period that it takes for you to learn to know how to do the job.
right.
But you also, at some point, somebody's got different ideas that it's worth a try. And if I keep that position, becomes my inheritance, then, you know, probably nobody's going to say, well, you know, Linda's done that for the last 25 years.
Right.
I'm not going to mention that we should maybe do it that way.
All right.
Not be good.
When we talk about then, we talked about this a little bit. Increasing complexity, and that's in everything: ministries, staff, finances. If you look at, which you know, you can. Our balance sheet is almost quadrupled in 3 years. So you know, that's gone from very sort of simple bookkeeping. To whoa, now we have two investment funds. We have people giving stocks. We have people giving online. We have people, so there's all sorts of complexity there. More lay leadership and staff, exactly. And that stuff right now. Role of clergy, like I said, is just going to have to change. And this is, of course, everybody gets so anxious about. Will you come and see me in the hospital? Yes. Absolutely, yeah.
We'll not go to the hospital in the first place. It'll be all right.
And so there's just always anxiety about that. Does this mean that I become totally aloof and distant from everybody? No, it's just the way that it's sort of I work and manage things. It's just different. Building, just having a conversation today, none of our restaurants are handicap accessible. The building project is not just because it would be great to have a fancy new thing. It's that I don't think these buildings are sustainable in the long run. And that there's going to be a crisis point where there's, and it's kind of like the Episcopal Church, right? Like we're going to either manage that now or the crisis is going to manage us because there'll have been some nearly catastrophic something. I've said this in a sermon. We asked an architect, how much would it be to put in new light fixtures in the church? He said $500,000 because they would have to rip out all of the wiring, and then once you start doing that, all codes start falling. And so that's when the vestry said, wait, so something has to be done, because you just look, it's just not sustainable. But
last week when you were talking about the parking lot, that got my attention. I'm
Yeah.
like, wow, that close to out of parking space, that is an immediate issue.
Yeah, we were looking out there after that last
yeah,
meeting.
uh-huh.
Like, why can't we solve that?
Yeah, I know it's parking over, but I know that's not a solution.
Right.
Right. I mean, that's not a solution for a number of reasons. It's what I think it's like 15 spots, maybe 18, 19 spots, something like that. I mean, that's not really capacity building, right? That's us going from here to here, when actually we need to be going like along here. And yeah, but you should have faith. It's really interesting to look at that. And also we know this front parking lot is not a full. It's so tight that.
My friend Becky said to me the other day, "So what were you doing Sunday? There was no space in front of your church." I said to her, "Well," she said, "I don't know where you're going to put people." I said, "Yeah, that is kind of an issue."
That's our big issue right now.
People driving by.
So, and again, that's the funny thing. Also, and this is classic transition size congregation. We have 2 people here at Bible study, so we have plenty of room for this. But we don't have enough room in our parking lot. So we're sort of at this weird point where things just aren't at equilibrium, and that's why everybody is so anxious.
It's like being a teenager.
It is. Oh, totally.
Exactly.
And what I've said is, I have now spent my entire ministry, including the church I worked at in seminary and transitional size congregations. So I just get it. Like at this point, I've been doing this now as least anxious about that as I can. And then opportunities in spring. I mean, oh my gosh, that just demographics. I mean, it's just I mean, as I said in my sermon, luxury apartments going in right here, 40 acres of office, retail, and residential space there. Just sort of influx of people.
Have you heard anything about a Kroger's going in here on this side too?
You would be the one to hear about that.
Yeah, no, I haven't actually. I did miss the last subdivision board meeting. So
Okay. Yeah, it's just because I know you were involved in some of that stuff. Oh, really?
That to me in the past.
It doesn't surprise me because they closed the one across
Now
the
it's
way.
Academy.
Mhm.
Yeah.
That would not surprise me. But the other thing that's happening along with all of those things that bring in more new people is that we have more marginal people than we have ever had. I think that's the other piece of an opportunity for this church.
Yeah.
And it's
No, you're totally right. And I told somebody at the diocese that part of my vision for outreach at Holy Comforter is that we be kind of this incredible wealth north of us and this poverty south of us. That Holy Comforter kind of becomes the funnel, to sort of how do we get here to here? That's going to be huge. And we're increasingly seeing this just during the week, people dropping in.
Well, even if you're just driving down the street, the number of people that you see that quite obviously have nowhere to be but where they are.
Oh yeah.
And that number has significantly increased since I've been here.
Right. Yeah. No, it's so true. And I mean, much more about it working at Spring Wilderness Ministries.
There's a lot there. I mean, there's just a lot, and there are people that they don't have any resources at all.
Yeah.
Because 1960 and South really gets serviced by now, and Interfaith really services the Woodlands North, and this little wedge that's right there is really without any kind of significant service.
Yeah.
Just
yeah. Talk to Karen. So that's kind of where we are. I know that this semester has not been like just Bible study. It's been a lot of just me talking. And
I think it's been really good.
Okay, good.
Yeah, it's helped me a lot to understand.
Sure.
That's like the foundation.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
before you build up on anything.
I kind of saw it as if confirmation is like Episcopal Church 101, this is like 301, like a little bit deeper, you know. And so we'll start again in August, the sort of when things kick back up. So yeah, thank you all for joining me. I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to see you in church. You can email me or leave comments here on the YouTube page. And like I said, be watching over the summer for some other. All right.